And the writer says that maybe as a society, that we might need to reconsider some of the rituals that we have thrown out of the window. That maybe we need to remember the power and coming together spiritually and the power that manifests when the Spirit-led, blood-washed Christians will continue to do the work that God has called us to do. And maybe we don't just need to do it with soldiers. We need to have these communal forgiveness rituals for anybody that's been separated. We need to have it for those who have been incarcerated, for those who have paid their debt to society, so that when they return to society, they're not stigmatized in such a way that they have to keep repaying it and repaying it and repaying it in the low faults of community. There's a spiritual void that the writer would say in this article. And I am sad to report that this spiritual void doesn't only exist outside the walls of the church. When people tell me, Reverend Carr, your Christology, that's just how I see Christ, it's so high, I say thank you very much. Because I don't know what picture it paints for you, but I keep the cross in front of me because the cross will not let me down. I keep the cross in front of me so that when I'm having a difficult day, I know that it's not personal. It's just because I'm with God and God is with me.
Amen. That's good.
In this narrative, this pericope that's written in John chapter 5, it starts out recognizing a high festival. And it is part of a chapter of writings that they call the festival cycles. And in this gospel writing, this chapter opens up with the acknowledgement of an unnamed or ambiguous festival. Many theologians will struggle with the ambiguity of this unnamed festival because some people just like to talk about walking by faith, but if they don't have concrete evidence, amen. But some of them resolve that this festival was legit and that it was real through their understanding of the Levitical writings, which point to the power of the Sabbath and the convocations that many would have around the observance and the practice of the Sabbath. In other words, to just bring it down to our practical level, it is a chapter that will find Jesus being problematic to the Jews. His opponent is having a real issue with Jesus in this 5th chapter because of what he does on the Sabbath day. They believe that the Sabbath day is a day of doing no work and just observing God, but have lost the real true power and understanding of what the Sabbath really means. They were unable, because they were such legalists, and they were unable to see the grace of God in the miracles and the healings that took place even on the Sabbath, because of the compassion that God has for his people, that Jesus would commune with community and heal whenever the healing was needed.
Amen.
We learn in studying the life of Jesus that Jesus' mode of operation was a very inclusive mode of operation, that Jesus would walk with the oppressed, that Jesus would intentionally find himself journeying into places where the high, mighty, self-righteous Jews and priests and religious people found that they were too big and too mighty and too important to journey. Jesus was not afraid of conflict. Jesus was not afraid of what they might say. This is why Jesus, even with his disciples, would take the direct journey to Galilee. And by going through Galilee, Jesus would go through Samaria. And in the chapter preceding this one, we will find that when Jesus would take the direct route to Galilee, that Jesus didn't care about what people thought, and that he would find himself standing at a well, talking to a woman at the well, during what was the traditional prayer hours. We found Jesus having compassion and having mercy and doing what God requires of us to do. Not worry about the hour, not worry about the situation, not worry about the crowd, but to have compassion on people, to stand in a gap and bring justice for those who do not have a voice, and to do it with all humility to God. This is why we find Jesus being in trouble and his disciples being in trouble when we read the gospel narrative of them walking through the fields, and it wasn't harvest day, it was the Sabbath. And the disciples would pick the grain and eat the grain, and the Jews would have a fit. Here comes Jesus again with these rogue disciples doing things on Sunday or doing things on Sabbath that we are not supposed to do. Worrying about the small stuff, the small things that are not important in life. We look around and we wonder where and what happened because we put too much energy in the small things. God has no respect of person. God doesn't care what we wear to church. God doesn't care where we sit in church. God doesn't care about the things that we have made small petty rules about. But we find Jesus doing what's best for the majority of people. And Jesus didn't care if they liked him. Jesus didn't care if they misunderstood him. And Jesus did not give up blessing people and helping people because of negative critiques.
Amen.
Jesus is trying to teach us in his discipling of his disciples that if we're going to be on this journey, we have to have the capacity to walk it like we talk it.
Say that.
The secondary narrative I want to concentrate on this morning that's happening in this Gospel of John at the 5th chapter is the narrative of the invalid man. Here we are on Sabbath, and Jesus is pushing himself to a part of the temple that a good Jew would not find themselves because they wouldn't want to take the chance of somebody touching them and making them unclean.
All right.
But yet we find Jesus going there, and we find the story of an invalid man who had been sitting at that pool in his state of infirmity, and the Bible doesn't tell us what the infirmity is. We don't know if he was one of the paralyzed. We don't know if he was one of the blind. We don't know if he was one of the lame. But whatever was going on with this man, he had been sitting here at this pool in this condition for a very long time. And when Jesus enters into the area where the pool was, which allegedly the folks said had a healing power occasionally when it was stirred. In the King James Version, which I have to maybe let some people down, but the scribes added some text to this narrative in the King James Version, but I actually kind of like the way they added this, Steve. And they added this. They said that at this pool, allegedly, that when an angel would come and get to the water, that the angel would trouble the water in such a way that when you stepped into the pool, you would be healed. And we learn that when Jesus gets to this location and he goes to this pool, Jesus sees all of these people, because there were many. Many had a strategic plan about how they were going to enter into that pool once that water was stirred. And Jesus, in my preaching imagination, probably heard all of the plans. But in the Bible, it says that Jesus went straight to the man that was an invalid for 38 years. Though many may have been calling out the name, Jesus would get through the cacophony of all of the conversations and go and find this man who was there for 38 years and who had not physically or mentally or spiritually called out for help. I've been telling you that even when we give up on God,
Amen.
I've been saying it since I got here in July, that even when we throw in the towel on God, God never give up on us. And the Bible says, and that this man had been in his condition, whatever his condition was, for 38 years. And his condition had him in such a deep place of hopelessness that when Jesus goes to the man, without the man calling for Jesus, and Jesus asks the man, knowing that if the man is by the pool, that the man must want to be healed, and Jesus asks the man, do you want to be made well? And after 38 years of nothing, instead of him saying a resounding yes, he begins to tell Jesus how he ain't got no one to help him get healed. Grace, let me just digress, because my preaching imagination takes me here with this story. I could just only imagine when that man decided to make that journey from wherever his home is, because it doesn't tell us, but he made that journey to the temple. I believe that the man had a strategic plan. He had been hearing about the alleged healings that happened to these outcasts who weren't able to go inside the temple, but had found some mercy and some compassion from God outside the temple near the pool. I don't know how old the man was when he got started on his journey, but I do know if the man was 20, 38 years later, he's 58. And if the man was 30, 38 years later, he's 68. And if the man was 40, 38 years, he's 78. I just know this, that when he once was younger, he had the energy in my preaching imagination to press his way to get some help. And when he got there, he starts seeing everybody jump the line and get before him. And whatever his condition was in his personality, he apparently did not have the social sophistication or the skills that he needed to make new friends at the pool. Maybe he just rolled up his mat and went so fast that he didn't bring the necessary tools that he would need for the pool. And he says that every time he tried to get to the pool, somebody got in before him. So 38 years later, the dream that he had, that was put deep down into his spirit and my preaching imagination, became one that he thought God had denied him of, and began to just give up. Maybe 38 years prior, he walked a little faster, but now 38 years later, his gait is too slow to get to the pool. I don't know what the man's real situation was and why he was there for 38 years. But Grace, I hear the Lord saying to me in the spirit as I preach that it doesn't matter how long we have waited on God, that God may not come when we call him, but God will show up. And when God shows up, God is on time. So it doesn't matter how long it has taken for God to come and journey with us. But God is here now, and it's not too late. Do you want to be made well?
Amen.
For God's time is not like our time. What I like is that in the chapter prior to this one, we find the story of a royal official who was a faithful person that sought God out through the person of Jesus about his dying son, and that his faith would bring him to Jesus, and that Jesus would respond with compassion, and Jesus would go and privately heal this son. And now in this 5th chapter, we find Jesus seeking out the man instead of the man seeking out him. And we find Jesus healing publicly someone who wasn't even looking for him at this point, and giving a public healing and not a private healing for someone who had the faith and believed. What I'm trying to say to us, Grace, is that no matter how hard we try, no matter how much evidence we think we have, we cannot put God in a box. God doesn't move at our command, but God will yield at our cry. If we would just stay faithful to the task, if we could just hold on even when it's not popular anymore, if we could just be still and know that he is God, then we will have the strength and the authentic walk that God is calling for us. And then we could just stop being talking heads about everything, and we can walk it like we talk it.
Amen.
Amen.
Just want to wrap it up with this formula, because I feel God doing something in the atmosphere in this place, and this is our opportunity to just keep it real with God, to let any fakeness go in this season. God is ready to move on our behalf. But to walk it like we talk it, we have to hold on when the heat is on. Don't we know that God is familiar with us, and that God is familiar with our situation, and that God understands low places, and that God understands how traumatic it must feel to have waited for so long. We can't give up when the heat is on. When God turns up the heat to a temperature that we feel uncomfortable in, start praising God. For I know 3 Hebrew boys that had to deal with God when the heat was on. They said that they turned the fire up so high that the officials that was turning it on was consumed by the heat. But these 3 Hebrew boys, Meshach, Cedric, and Abednego, didn't give up, didn't lose faith with the intimidation of fire and heat. And they said when they checked in on them to see how things were going, not only were they still praising God, but God was in the heat with them. I just want you to know, Grace, that God is an abiding presence, and God has not left the scene. So when the heat is on, thank God for the heat, and don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give up when the season is dry. Don't give up when the season is dry. Don't give up when the season is dry. When you're not the popular destination anymore. Don't give up when the season is dry. When just the few and the faithful show up. Keep on praising. Keep on coming. Keep on trusting, because your day and your greater is coming. We can't give up when it's time for change, because we've never done it like that before. Those words need to be inscribed at the entryway of many cemeteries. We never did it like that before. Will kill you in this season. Don't be scared or don't be scared. God is with us.
Yes.
The formula is to hold on. Can't give up when the money is funny and the change is strange. God does his best accounting when the money is funny and the change is strange. We don't have to relegate ourselves to a low thinking, a stingy way, and a cheap response. For God is able and God will supply all of our needs according to his glories. We can't get caught, Grace, in the negative feelings that would make us think 38 years is the end of our journey. We have to keep pressing, and we have to keep planning, and we have to keep pushing. Because Grace, if Jesus showed up to this invalid at the pool who wasn't even calling, how much more would Jesus do for those of us who come and kick our heels in praise? How much more will Jesus do for those of us who have not thrown in the towel on our commitment to the church? How much more will Jesus do if we would just have the tenacity, if we can just hold on, if we can just realize that we still rise in the power of God, if we can learn how to walk it like we talk it. I agree, in closing with Tick, that we must have an intentional spiritual component to have holistic healing, not just for veterans, but for every component of our life. That we must engage in this journey in an authentic and genuine way. From our urban audience, whom I stole or borrowed my theme this morning, there's a new group. There's a new group out. Maybe they're not new, but they're new to me. Called Migos. And they have some popular rappers that rap with this group. Now I'm looking at your faces more. You are urban than I thought. And they have a song that Migos did with Drake called Walk It Like I Talk It. And when I looked at the title, and then when I looked at the lyrics to try and use it for my sermon, I realized, well, the lyrics ain't gonna work. and I didn't judge the lyrics, because the lyrics are an expression of where these young people who live in this urban hip-hop culture are at. They're being authentic, better than some of us, in how they're expressing themselves. So then I went a little deeper. I wanted to know the origin of the song. Why did they write it? Walk it like I talk it. And I found this out, that the song was written to address fake folk. The song was written to address people who want to be something that they're not. The song was written to encourage somebody to keep it real, to keep it authentic, to keep it genuine, to walk it like you talk it. If you can't be it, don't fake it. Be your genuine self. Be your authentic self. And I take that, Grace, on this morning and say to you, walk it like you talk it. Be your authentic self. Tap into your deeper inner self and hear what God is saying to you. Be who God made you, and then you will be your best. But then I thought about it a little bit deeper, Paula, and I said, you know, amigos, y'all ain't the only ones that's walking it like you talk it. 2,000 years ago, there was somebody that's the creator of all of this that walked it like he talked it. And we call him Jesus. And he walked it all the way to Calvary after an unjust trial. So I just want to encourage someone who may have dealt with injustice in their life. That's okay. You're in good company. But Jesus walked it like he talked it all the way to Calvary. And when the crowd was going, skirt, Jesus looked down from that cross and had compassion on them and said, forgive them. And then Jesus died for all of our sins. And he was risen, I'm told, 3 days later. So no matter where we're at in this journey, no matter what pool we see ourselves lying at on this morning, I just want you to be encouraged to keep walking it like you talk it, because your resurrection is coming.